Okay, thanks. We're going to be recording this. We're going to be storing it with the Mountainside Apologetics videos. So I wanted to get a little introduction in here. My name is Doug Brown, one of the elders of the congregation. And in just a moment, I'm going to introduce Latane Scott. She knows Dr. Collins very well. They co-wrote a book together. They should be acquainted by now. So Latane has her Doctor of Divinity degree from Trinity Southwest Theological Seminary, if I got that right. And she's an author, quite an accomplished author. And so Dr. Collins decided to partner with her to write the book, Discovering the City of Sodom, which I've read 2 or 3 times now, and I recommend it to you. Latane is going to tell us a little about Dr. Collins, and then we want to get him on to spend the time talking about the excavation of Sodom.
I'm honored to introduce Dr. Collins. He's a hometown boy. He's from Albuquerque, and most people don't realize that. He's director of the School of Archaeology at Veritas University, and he's the continuing research professor in the College of Archaeology here in Albuquerque at Trinity Southwest University. He has written several books, one of which I was honored to be able to co-author with him. But he's been excavating and leading tours for over 30 years in the Holy Lands. And this is not an Indiana Jones who goes out with his hat and his whip. These excavations are done under the authority of the local governments, primarily in Jordan, although I think he's done some others. He has done documentary films that have shown on the National Geographic Channel, Discovery Channel, History Channel, and Travel Channel, so he's quite well known. And his contributions to the field of archaeology have been significant. Now, the best thing you have to know about Dr. Collins is his wife, Danette. And so Danette is the trooper, that's the woman behind the man who has stood with him, dug in the dirt, helped all along. And Dr. Collins' story, which he may tell you in detail, is about sitting in a hotel room one night and in the Holy Lands and realizing that if there were specific geographical markers to a site, and in this case the site of Sodom in Jordan, then you should be able to take that site, you should be able to take those geographical markers in the Bible and find the site, which he did. And it's an extraordinary situation. The last thing I want to say is something, I guess, a little bit more personal, especially for the people that are younger here. Someday you're going to be able to say, I sat in a presentation by Dr. Stephen Collins, the discoverer of Sodom. What is so significant about this is he is making believers, not in a theological sense, of Muslims who also have the Old Testament history that we share with them, with Christians, of course, who see the Bible verified in being authentic and reliable, but also among atheists. Many people who are in biblical archaeology aren't necessarily Christians or Jews, but he is convincing them, among them Dr. Lane Rittmeyer, who, if you've been to Israel, all of the markers at any of the archaeological sites with the descriptions of the sites, they're all done by Dr. Rittmeyer, who stood at the gates of Sodom and said, this is Sodom. The other thing that you're going to be able to understand is that history just happened. The facts of history are what they are. But the thing that Dr. Collins has helped the world to do is to be able to re-represent those facts in light of biblical history and to see that the Bible is itself authentic. So, Dr. Collins?
Is that working?
Says, got it? Oh, did we get it? All right. Well, it's very nice to be here. It's been a while since I was at Mountainside. I think the last time I was here, if I remember correctly, was when we did our book launch for Discovering the City of Sodom. Let's see, I like looking over my left shoulder, so I'm going to come over this way. Aha. Well, it's good for you to be here. Good that you're here. It's good for you to be here. How many of you, raise your hand if you have read Discovering the City of Sodom? Let's do it the other way. Raise your hand if you have not read Discovering the City of Sodom. Okay, let's take names. and we have plenty of those books left, and it's easy to get them on Amazon. But let me introduce another one to you. This is the Harvest Handbook of Bible Lands. How many of you have a copy of this? Some do. Okay, a few. The Bible. Don't open it without this. Okay? This really is a fantastic tool that just came out last year. We worked really hard on this. It has terrific maps. It has Sodom in the right place. Has the right Pharaoh, the Exodus. It's got all the great stuff. It takes you through the Bible cover to cover with the historical background, archaeological background of what's happening throughout the Bible. So that's a terrific volume. If you don't have it yet, we love this. We love this resource. Latane mentioned that way back, and I think it's actually 1996. That's a long time ago. That I was sitting in a hotel room, about ready to take my tour group over to the side of Babadra, the traditional side of Sodom, and so I just wanted to kind of brush up on that, and I read through the passages regarding Sodom, and I got to the end of it, and I thought, I didn't see anything in there that would locate Sodom toward the south end of the Dead Sea, and which is where this site is located. So I read it again, I read it again, I read it again, and by the time I got through reading it 3 or 4 times, I thought, you know, not only is there nothing in the text that would locate Sodom toward the south end of the Dead Sea, everything in the text would locate Sodom north and east of the Dead Sea in the southern Jordan Valley. And we weren't ready to do an excavation at that point. We were actually still, in fact, we had just entered our second season at Khirbet el-Makadar up in the West Bank on the Israel side of the river. And so I wasn't looking for an excavation, so I just sort of logged it in the back of my mind and went on about our business. But because of the Intifada and this political situation heating up in the West Bank about 2000, we finished our 2000 season there, but then we had to stop because we just couldn't go back. It just wasn't safe. And so that winter I was thinking, and this is what an archaeologist does. An archaeologist does when you don't have anything to do the coming summer. I was thinking, wait a minute, we just canceled the dig for this next summer. What are we going to do? You know, you have to have something to do. So, aha, Sodom. I'm going to go back and I'm going to attack that issue. So we did a lot of research. I presented a society paper the next fall about it, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger. Finally, we said, you know what? We have to test this hypothesis. We have to go over there and get on the ground. We went over and got on the ground, and oh my goodness, were we surprised. Because not a single archaeological map that we could find, by Israelis or Jordanians or Europeans or Americans, didn't matter. You look at the north end of the Dead Sea, and that piece of land on the east side of the river was just a blank. Virtually no archaeological sites. I think there was one that had been excavated, but really it was just a big blank, and the Bible says there should be at least, Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim, that's 2, so at least 5 cities, and why weren't they there? But as soon as we got on the ground in Jordan, it was amazing looking at recent archaeological reports and surveys and actually going to each of the sites in the region. We found 14 major archaeological sites, so now we had the opposite problem. We went in thinking, uh-oh, we should have Sodom in the cities of the plain on this piece of real estate, but looking on everybody's maps, there's nothing there particularly. And all of a sudden, we had 14 sites. Now we had too many. So now we had to go site to site to site to site and look at them, because I had determined in my research that Sodom should have been the biggest city northeast of the Dead Sea in the Jordan Valley. And so we ran across, in our research, this one site, el-Hammam, And by the way, at that time, there wasn't even a map, a sign. See, el-Hammam? That little sign means it's an archaeological site. This was just from 2000, from last year, and this is the first time el-Hammam has appeared on a road sign. And so it's pretty exciting. In fact, all of those cities, Tel al-Kafrain, Tel Iktanu, and el-Hammam, are all part of the cities of the plain complex from the Bible. And they wouldn't have roadsides now if it hadn't been for our work. So this was a real exciting day to actually see the road signs. So we went, we looked, and we picked out the biggest one. And what was interesting is that the biggest one was many orders of magnitude larger than all the others. It wasn't like, well, it's almost as big as that one. Maybe this one's a little bigger. No, this one was like, whoa. All the other sites were maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 acres. This one was 62 acres, which put it in the upper echelon of about the upper 3% of city size for the ancient world in this area. So it was a really, really big site. We now know it that the site footprint is almost 200 acres because it actually spreads off the main mound. And then we thought, and I still wasn't looking for an excavation. I just wanted to know if it was possible. But once I saw that site, it was like, oh my goodness, why has no one excavated this? It was sort of like that proverbial gorilla in the room, right? Everybody has ignored this. Why? And so I started visiting. For the next 5 years, I was in the office of the Director General of the Department of Antiquities of Jordan every year, at least once a year, several times, twice a year, asking him about that site. We'd like to propose to excavate this site. No, you can't have that site. I go back the next year, same story. Can't have that site. You can have any site in Jordan you want. Just pick another site, but you can't have that site. Why? Nobody would ever give me a reason. Well, I finally did find out the reason, and I'm not going to bore you with the reason, but a few things were published from another archaeological team that mentioned Israelite four-room houses on the Transjordan side of the river. And the archaeologists didn't care. It did not sit well with the politicians. And because now they're saying, oh no, Israel's going to have a claim on our side of the river. So that didn't sit well. And so for that reason, they weren't giving out dig permits to anybody who smacked of being an evangelical. Okay. Well, I finally told Dr. Fawaz, I said, listen, I'm not going to do that to you. We're prepared to excavate this site. And then I'm going to kind of conflate the story down a little bit. He said, when do you want to start? This was in September of 2005. And like an idiot, I said, December. And we actually did. We actually got a team on the ground and got there. Well, that was in 2005. We have now gone through 15 archaeological excavation seasons at el-Hammam, and it looks a whole lot different today than it did back then. We know a lot more now than we knew then. Thankfully, everything we thought that was true, that Sodom actually did exist, in spite of many scholars who said it didn't exist, it was simply mythical. Not only did we find out it existed, but Gomorrah is there, and Admah is there, and Zeboiim is there, and a bunch of other satellite towns and villages are there. We now know it as the most highly concentrated population center in the southern Levant during the Bronze Age. What happened? And so we kind of goad our liberal colleagues by saying, you know, if you'd taken the Sodom narrative seriously, you might have discovered this yourself. You might have gone looking in this location and you might have discovered this civilization, which nobody knew anything about, but you didn't and you didn't. But we did and we did. And so we went there, we took the Bible seriously, we did go there, and we did find it. And so, as we say, the rest is history, but it's not over yet. We tried to have a season 16 last year, but of course you know what happened there. Actually, it would have been this year. We did have a 2020 season. We had 8 weeks in the field. We got back 3 days before the world shut down. I mean, we just barely squeaked back to the U.S. And so we did get in our 2020 season. Everything I'm going to show you today is from the 2020 season. And there's some pretty exciting stuff going on. But we weren't able to go back in 2021. We would have been there in January, February, and March, and it didn't happen. But we decided to go ahead and raise the funds we needed that we would have needed to do a dig season, but to take that money, because we couldn't go, to take that money and do sort of a catch-up with all the analysis we needed to do. Because we had, we've just been digging. A lot of digs will dig a year, go off a year, do analysis, dig a year, go off a year. But we had been digging every single year for 15 years. And so we had a lot of backlog of analysis, things like radiocarbon dating and bone analysis and all sorts of stuff that we needed to do. And before 2020, I wouldn't have said DNA analysis, but we actually found a couple of, we don't know if they're guys or ladies or gentlemen, but we found 2 partial. Well, the whole skeletons were there, just that they were so exploded, probably from being heated up and exploding, that they were just in fragments. But we got good skull fragments on one in upper dentition, good skull fragments on the other in upper dentition. I called them Bert and Ernie. I couldn't think of anything else. So we just called them Bert and Ernie. And Bert and Ernie are scheduled to have their dentin analyzed for their DNA, because we think we have some interesting connections to the Aegean world, and so we would like to see if that's really the case. So that's still pending. We're still trying to decide on the lab, trying to find a really good lab that can do this for us. But I'm just gonna walk you through these slides and talk about them. But this was a really exciting day. And that's my 2 co-directors, Carol Kobes on the left, Gary Byers, being Gary Byers underneath the sign, and that's me in the shadow there on the right. But that was a pretty exciting day to actually have a sign that has never been there before about your site. So that was pretty cool. Let's do the next slide. You said, well, how exciting is that? I don't expect you to get too excited about that, but I get excited about that. What is that? That is the latest. We just produced this chart. This chart is the stratigraphic chart for el-Hammam after 15 years of excavation. You say, well, okay, fine. Next slide. No, leave that slide. But see, it says local stratigraphy. So what we do is we establish the individual stratigraphy of each field. We have field A, B, C, D, E on the lower city, and field A, B, C, D on the upper city. And in each field, we establish what stratigraphic layers, archaeological layers, are in that particular location. And then eventually, that is all sorted out to make site-wide stratigraphic analysis. And that's what's on the very left column. So you see general stratum, so we have 21 strata. That's a lot. So we have 21 strata, and so this is how it all plays out. So anyway, this is very exciting to get to this point where we're actually prepping to publish some of our final reports, and that's going to happen. I think we're going to try to keep excavating through 2025, which would take us through our season 20. And then go into our final phase of publication. Next slide. That slide Now, Latane, you remember seeing the site, and that was, wow, how many years ago? 2011. So we've widened up the excavation. This is the excavation on the upper city. This is the palace of Sodom. This is the palace of Sodom. This is the palace of King Bera. That's pretty exciting that you have a building that a Bible character actually lived in. I think that's pretty cool. But you can see the wall B, you see it there at the bottom. That wall is 2.2 meters thick. Can I do that in feet? Is it like 6 feet, 7, almost 8 feet? And so these are very large walls. Now, the mud bricks that you see right there, that dirt-looking stuff on top of the wall, that's mud brick. And all of our walls had mud brick standing to about this height. Somewhere between 10 and 15 courses of mud brick on each one of our foundations. We have removed that mud brick on many of the foundations and preserved it on others because we need to see the way the foundation is built. So sometimes we remove it. But you can see, now one thing that we did recently, I think we did this 3 or 4 years ago, and some of you contributed to this, we invested in Camel 1. That's the truck, right there at the top. That Mitsubishi pickup truck, which carries all of our equipment up the hill and down the hill. We used to lug it up by hand. You say, everybody would get a wheelbarrow, they'd fill it up, and they'd push it up the hill and down the hill every day. It was awful. Finally, we just said, you know what, we need, and sometimes we'd try to borrow the local Arab trucks. And good luck with sometimes they couldn't even make it up the hill once they were loaded. So we said, okay, we need a truck, and we finally got a truck. So that's Camel 1, and that's what we called it. So, but you look at this area. By the way, the yellow line that you see there is the shear line, the tops of the walls of the city, the mud brick structures that were sheared off in the explosive destruction event of Sodom. They were literally sheared off. Now, what happens to a mud brick structure? If I asked this question in New York, like everybody would just glaze over. But in New Mexico, you get it, right? We know adobes. We know mud bricks. If you leave a mud brick structure just to deteriorate in the weather, what happens? In 100 years, it just kind of melts away. It just goes away. Well, people have asked us, well, how do you know it just didn't melt away? Well, if it melts away, since this is on the upper city, on the top of the upper city, where would that melted mud brick go, or that decomposing mud brick go, if it was being washed away in the rainy seasons? It would go down the hill, and it would be deposited in the swale below the palace. That's where it would go. Well, we excavated there. Guess what we didn't find? No mud brick detritus. There's no decomposed mud brick down there. We found exactly the same thing down there as we found up here. Sheared off walls and 1.5 meters of decomposed stuff. Just exploded, disintegrated stuff of everyday life. Pottery, beams, wood, pieces of everything, pieces of people, all mixed in here. We didn't have another word for it. We just called it the Cuisinart effect. It's just like taking a, pile of vegetables, throwing them in a Cuisinart, hitting the button. Just churning it, mixing. That's what it looks like. It's just bits and pieces of everything and, well, everybody who was there. And but that's what's in between the walls. That's what we've dug out, that destruction matrix, in order to make it look like this. And so you see the red line, which represents just the layer of kind of blown in, wind-blown debris that's on top of it. But that yellow line represents that shear line, the tops of the mud brick walls that were just literally sheared off. Now, how do you shear off mud brick walls that are 8 feet thick? How do you just blow it off and shear it off? Well, we now know. We didn't know when we started. We suspected it because Genesis 19, which says God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah with fire and burning stone from out of the heavens from Yahweh. What else did that sound like? I mean, if you stop and think about that, what does that sound like? What it sounds like is a meteoritic airburst event, which 15 years ago was sort of operating, that science was sort of operating on the fringes of physics and astrophysics. I mean, it was way out. That was kind of a peripheral kind of thing. Well, by now, and this was given some impetus in 2013 when we published our book, Discovering the City of Sodom, in which is a chapter on the airburst. And you remember and I think it happened the very week that Simon & Schuster released our book, the airburst that exploded over Chelyabinsk, Russia happened in February. And I'm going, nobody ever heard of an airburst event unless they really, studied it, but most people don't. So the whole world, nobody ever heard of this. And all of a sudden, everybody in the world, 1,500 dash cams capture this object coming in and exploding in the atmosphere. Now, it exploded about 10 miles up, so it didn't kill anybody. But it was all over the news, headlines. And I emailed Latane, or I called you or something, and what I said to Latane was, wow, does Simon & Schuster have connections or what? Wow, that it couldn't be any better. Since then, there has actually been at least one and maybe two international symposia on the Chelyabinsk event, and now that phenomenon of meteoritic airburst events has come to the fore of science. It's a big deal. About 5 years ago, a team of scientists got wind of certain things that we were discovering on the site, like pieces of pottery, the outside of which was superficially melted into glass. Since then, we found melted mud bricks, melted plaster, and of course, these are probably on the upper parapets, on the upper parts of the buildings and the roofs of the buildings, getting maximal exposure to this explosive event that we know came from the southwest. It came in shallow from the southwest. It exploded about 1 mile above the surface, right over the northeast of the Dead Sea, pushed billions of tons of Dead Sea salts and vaporized Dead Sea salts and water up over the landscape. It brought with it all of the proxies, all of the little smoking gun earmarks of airburst events like high platinum spike, iridium spike, osmium, all of these kinds of things that are not found really on the Earth. At least osmium's not even found here. It comes in airbursts. Iridium's rare, but it comes in airbursts. And so the middle bronze destruction layer is full of this stuff. It doesn't appear above it, doesn't appear below. Not in the strata above, not in the strata below. Every single classical we know now, every single classical proxy for an airburst event is in that layer. There is no doubt. No doubt. Well, a team of scientists got wind of it. And another one would find out about it, and they'd glom on. Another one would find out about, oh, give me a piece of that. I want to research that. I want to analyze that piece of that sample and this sample and all of that. By this time, over 5 years, 22 different scientists from literally across the world, an international team of people who most of whom are not people of faith. They're just scientists. And they have contributed to this. They have now, after 5-6 years of analysis, have submitted the paper to a major scientific journal for publication. It's a really big paper. It's so important, however, that the editors of the paper, of the journal, didn't ask the team to shorten it. It was so important. It's probably going to appear as a monograph. It's going to take up the entire journal for one issue. What's interesting about that is the most prestigious scientific journal in the country is the Proceedings of the American or National Academy of Sciences. That's a really big deal. Now, we're not publishing in that because they can't publish one this big. We're publishing in one of their, another major journal that will do the whole thing. But one of the contributors to our paper is on the editorial board of the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. So this is a stellar group of airburst scientists. It's amazing. Well, let's go ahead and go on through. And this is a very deep hole that we dug. We'd been working in the palace 20, 30 meters to the northeast, and I wanted to find the other end of the palace. I wanted to find where it integrated with the fortification system on the far southwest edge. And so let's do the next slide. And this hole got really deep. This probe got really, really deep. In fact, it went down about 7.5, 8 meters. And we got to this. This is what we were after. I didn't know we were going to hit it, but we hit it. The next slide. Right there. That is the far perimeter southwest wall of the palace complex. And we hit it. And we know it's the exterior wall of the palace complex because the bricks are very unusual in the exterior. The interior walls have the standard size bricks, sort of like 20 centimeters by 15 centimeters by 40 centimeters. These are 40 by 40. They're square. And so the 40 by 40 bricks are here. We know this is the outside perimeter wall. Next slide. This is just, I just wanted to give you a close-up. This is also in the palace complex just to show you what mud brick looks like on top of a foundation. It's really exciting when you dig things like this. This mud brick hadn't seen the light of day since 1700 BC. 3,700 years ago, this building was destroyed in the event that took out biblical Sodom, and that's some of the palace mud bricks. Next slide. I just threw these in. This is what a radiocarbon date looks like. We always said if we could find biblical Sodom, there's been all kinds of controversy about how you date Abraham, where you put him and all of that, because we know we can't use the Usher chronologies and all of that because they're base 60. They're not base 10 arithmetic numbers. They have no numerical value. They're actually honorific formulas. And so how do we find the date of Abraham? How do we build a chronology? You do that scientifically by finding the city of Sodom and dating the destruction. If you can get a date on the destruction, voila, you have the right placement for the time of Abraham. And we found it. This is one of them. You can see that sort of the midline here is about 1700 BC. And that's what we say, 1700 plus minus 50 BC. That's what we do. So next slide. Here's another one. This is just another carbon sample. And what kind of samples do we have? Pieces of beams. But big wooden beams are not good for radiocarbon. What you want are what we call short life samples. So these are just little pieces of barley grains, carbonized barley, things like that. Single season stuff. And so that's what some of these represent. Next slide. Look at that. See the frothiness of it? Bubbled, melted up. This is a melted mud brick. This is a corner of a mud brick that has had a temperature applied to it, and we've had that temperature analyzed from the pottery surfaces, from these surfaces. I mean, we're talking about in this matrix of this brick and of the pottery, we have zircons that are boiled. I think the temperature for boiling a zircon is like 3,800 degrees centigrade. It's pretty toasty. There isn't anything terrestrially that can do that, right? Not volcanoes, not anything. It's absolutely stunning. Next slide. This just came a couple of days ago. They're going to add this to the paper. It's going to squeak under. By the way, it has cleared peer review and it's been approved for publication, so it's going to happen. I thought this was a piece of brick or a piece of pottery that had just been melted. It's not. The analysis shows it's limestone. This is a piece of plaster from the palace. Next one. Cut away. Look at that. Just melted, bubbled up. What kind of temperature do you need to do this? Here's what we've determined based on the superficiality of the melt on the surfaces of some of the pottery. It's very high heat, but it's very quick, because if it was very high heat sustained for more than a few seconds, it would melt the whole sherd, because sherds are quarter-inch thick, something like that. And so what we've determined is somewhere around 20,000 degrees plus Fahrenheit for a fraction of a second. That kind of exposure. It's really explosive stuff. Next slide. Here's the blowover. I love this. A is the wall. That's a mud brick wall. D is the chunkier debris on the southwest side of the wall. On the northwest side of the wall, look at those layers. That's blowover. Because this event is coming in shallow from the southwest and it's exploding upon the entire area, taking out about 400 square kilometers, all the cities with it, including the city of Sodom. And just, this is the leftover after the event sweeps through. It's just the little fine-grained stuff that just blows over what remains of the wall stubs. It's fantastic. So the evidence of this is really amazing. Next slide. Now, one thing we did this year, and I'll kind of close with this, we did something that nobody else has ever been able to do. We flew a drone over an archaeological site in Jordan. Drones up to that point have been illegal. Every other archaeological dig wanted a drone. They couldn't fly a drone. One team brought in a drone. It got into customs, and that was 5 years ago, and it's still there. Couldn't get it out of customs. So Gary Byers and I, my assistant director, first day at the hotel in the 2020 season, we walk into the lobby of the hotel, and here comes somebody I've never met. Gary never met him. He had signed up for the dig. He showed up the day before we did. And here comes this Don Harms. Don walks up and says, "Hi, Don, how you doing?" "Oh, it's great to be here." He says, "I got a surprise for you." "What?" "I've got a drone." "You what?" "I've got a drone." Gary and I are thinking, wait a minute. How did you get that through customs? I had it in my carry-on bag. So now we're going, oh my goodness, drones are illegal, and we've got a drone. What are we going to do? So we had to come clean with the Department of Antiquities. We went to the department. We said, same story. We didn't plan this. We didn't know it was coming. He was just a naive volunteer, and he shows up and gets through customs with a drone, and a pretty good one at that. And here's what we want to do. Would you help us go to the Ministry of the Interior and the military, and would you help us jump through all the hoops? And we will donate the drone to the Department of Antiquities. We'll own it. We'll donate it to you. You can charge people to use it, except us. That's part of the agreement. And we could use it for free. And can we do this? They said, yeah, let's do it. So they started working on it. Well, that was week 1. Week 2, week 3, week 4. By week 8, I guess week 6, nothing had happened. We keep calling. Any luck? Anything? No. Well, finally, on the second to the last day of the dig, we got a call. You can fly the drone. We'll send the military guys down, and of course you have to pay the military guys to come down. But we got to fly the drone. Not only that, we wrote the drone protocol for the Department of Antiquities, and even the American Centers of Oriental Research tested our protocol. They got the drone after we had left. They got the drone from the DOA and flew it, and it all works great. We're the first drone, and it was just a blessing. God did that. We didn't plan it. It just happened. So I just thought I'd show you a little drone. This is the drone team from that day. And let's just show you a couple of drone shots, next couple of slides. There's one. It's great to have a drone, to be able to get up and look. Now, the reason drones are real sensitive in this part of Jordan is because on the very next hill over is King Abdullah's Winter Palace. Okay, so you can only fly like 500 meters like that in each direction. So they would fly it out, and our military guys just started getting really nervous. That's far enough. That's far enough. That's far. Get it back. So, in next slide. We just love it to be able to look at over our side. This is looking over the upper city. Next slide. And you can just get right over, just take thousands of shots. I mean, it's just taking shots like that. Yeah, actually, it's taking video, and you're just carving them up. But we love it. So that's great. God just really blessed us with this. Next slide. Is there a next slide? Is that it? All right, good. Well, anyway, that's just kind of an overview of where we are. We don't hardly even discuss and argue about the location of Sodom anymore because it's a done deal. Nothing else that was ever proposed for the site of Sodom has any evidence at all. We have all the evidence you could ever want. And so that's just a done deal. People are recognizing it. But here's the problem, a little bit of a problem with some of our liberal colleagues. They said, first of all, it's a myth. The cities of the plain are mythical cities. They didn't exist at all. Well, now not only do we know that factually they did exist, but they were destroyed in a manner commensurate with the biblical description in Genesis 19. Fire out of the sky. Now, what are they going to do with this? They cannot deny now that the cities are not real. They are real. They can't deny that the airburst event that's phenomenologically described in Genesis 19, they can't deny that happened. And what are they going to do? Well, we're going to find out. We've been waiting. We've just been keeping this airburst thing as quiet as we could. And now it's going to be published. It's going to come out big time. And we're going to have a lot of fun with it. Because, by the way, the paper does mention Sodom buried somewhere in the footnotes. Mentions Genesis and all of that. I didn't want him to put that in there. I kept telling him, don't. But they did. They said, well, yeah, because this is the only airburst in the history of the planet that has ancient documentation. So we can't not put that in there. Okay, just hide it somewhere. Just shove it in there. And they did. We can't wait for that to come out, and now we can quote that paper. It's going to be a lot of fun. So anyway, that's where we are. Does Sodom exist? Yes. Are we still excavating it? Yes. Would you like to help excavate it? Maybe, maybe not. But if you would like, you can sign up to do that. We'd love to have you. Anyway, keep praying for our team. It's been a very exciting run. Thanks to Latane for all the wonderful work she did on our book, which is just incredible. And it's still a great read. Even though it's a few years old, it's still a great read. So if you haven't got it, please get it and read it. You'll enjoy it. Anyway, I don't think we have any time for questions, but I'll hang out kind of between. And if you have a question, come on up. I won't go away.
Yes. Dr. Collins, I just found out this morning the ladies of Mountainside, well, we've known they had a quilting ministry for a long time. They make quilts for people, and they have made a quilt for you and your wife, Danette. So Latane's got this for you. If you want to hang it up here and display it. It is.
Thank you all.
It is.
Very much.
All right. Thanks for coming to give a presentation to us.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks. This is concluded now. We'll adjourn.